Hello, lovely folks of YouTube, Ren here. So Ostara is coming. I do plan on making a tea for Ostara, which we're going to start working on today. You may be thinking, wait a second, if we're making a tea, what are we doing outside? Well, it being Ostara is a time of new growth. I felt it was only fitting that we use some plants that are showing new growth out in my garden right now. And a lot of those plants are not plants that I planted. They're what we would normally consider to be weeds. So I wanted to talk about some of those plants and show you them in their native environment so you can see what we're talking about before I harvest them. So we're going to go into this bed behind me right here. Oh, there we go. So this is my herb bed, and as you can see, it is just full of stuff, a lot of dead things from last year, etc., etc. But there are two plants in particular that I did not plant that we are going to use for our tea. So this is the first one right here. This is commonly known as speedwell, these little blue flowers here. It is in the Veronica family. This is a weed for all intents and purposes. But we're actually going to put it to use in our tea. The other one is actually right behind it. These little purple spikes right here, that right there, that is Lamia. It's in the Lamiaceae family, definitely. It is in the mint family. It's called purple dead nettle. They call it dead nettle because it resembles nettle, but has no sting to it. So both of these are edible in small quantities, so we're going to be using them in our tea. And actually everything that we could possibly use in our tea is in this bed, because the other things we're going to use, you can see, well, maybe this right here. Oh, let me get past the nettles here. That right there, that's some spearmint that's popping up. So that's going to be weeded out and put into our tea as well. And then finally, we have a whole bunch over here. That's all lemon balm. That also needs to be pulled out because this is growing in the wrong spot. So all of these plants that are growing in the wrong places are going to be weeded out of this bed and repurposed into our tea. So in another day or two, when those have started to dry, then we'll start making our tea. And I'll come back at that point. All right, welcome back. It's been a couple of days. My herbs have partially dried that I picked from the garden, not completely. Some of them I'm going to use some of last year's herbs because I do need to get rid of them before the spring. I have to apologize for this. Stop. I have my friend Hades here, who is not very well behaved. Yes. Come on, mister. Go on to your chair. Hades was a stray that we've adopted. He adopted us. He decided he wanted to come into our house. So, but he's still learning how to behave as a house cat and not just an outdoor cat that has free reign over everything. Anyway, he's a good boy though. He's very sweet. He just needs to learn some manners, that's all. So, let's actually get to our tea blend here. In the recipe book as always. Now, some of these plants, like the Veronica, the dead nettle, you may not necessarily have those available. I picked those because they're what I have that's edible and is growing right now. If you don't have those plants in your area, or if you have other plants that are currently growing that are edible, caveat, you are more than welcome to substitute. I used them, like I said, because they're what I had. I'm trying to embody the spirit of the season, and by doing that, I'm picking what I had outside. For example, like if it had been a little warmer, I might have had some violets available, in which case violets would have definitely made their way into this recipe, but as it is, it's been too cold and the violets haven't popped up yet. So that's an example of one of the things that you can use to substitute. On the matter of substitution as well, I'm using green tea for this recipe, mainly because I don't have any white tea left. And green tea makes a good substitute. White tea would probably be a little more appropriate for this recipe, but you use what you got, right? And if you don't like green or white tea, you're welcome to use black tea or just omit tea altogether, in which case it would just be an herbal infusion. But we're going to start with our green tea. This is a gunpowder green tea that I have. I'm doing 2 parts of green tea. And in this case, I'm using teaspoons for my parts. 2 parts of green tea. Make sure I get the right one here. So, next one, spearmint. So this is one of the plants that you saw I had popping up, growing wild out there. I'm doing 1 part of spearmint, and I'm doing kind of a generous scoop here because it's going to compress down as I smush it into the teaspoon. There we go, that's about 1 part right there. Spearmint, of course, is good for raising those energetic vibrations, much like green tea, or really tea in general, is good for, you know, increasing those vibrations or energy. Spearmint also has some healing properties to it, which is one of the things we're invoking in this, because this is a time of kind of recuperating from the dark of winter and moving outwards, and, you know, finding that energy to put into new growth and to new projects. So next thing we're going to have peppermint. Yes, we are doing 2 different types of mint. Yes, this will be somewhat minty in its flavor profile, but it gets mitigated by some of the other herbs. So there's our peppermint, 1 part. And yet another member of our mint family, this is lemon balm, or Melissa officinalis. This is the other one that was kind of growing a little haywire out there. And again, this one is not broken down, so I'm going to get a very generous scoop and just kind of smush it into my spoon here. Yep. 1 part lemon balm. And then finally, our herbs from outside. So this is the speedwell. This one dried a little bit more effectively than the dead nettle did. I'm just going to take off a few of these sprigs here, and I'll put the rest up to hang up and dry the rest of the way. This is going to be a little tricky. Probably would have been better if I had a mat. Oh well. That is not a teaspoon, it's a tablespoon. So I'm going to try and gargle these into my hand and hopefully get about a teaspoon's worth. Stems still in there. There we go. That's probably, there we go. That looks like about a teaspoon there in my hand. I'm going to use my actual spoon to measure. Yep, that is close enough. Close enough. And then finally, the last thing is the purple dead nettle. This one is a lot thicker. You can see it is not dried. It is okay to use some somewhat fresh product when you're making a tea. In fact, you can even use entirely fresh. You just need to increase the quantities. So like if I were using, say, fresh spearmint in my tea instead of dried, I would use roughly 3 times the amount. So like instead of a teaspoon, I would use a tablespoon, because a tablespoon is about 3 teaspoons. So this is about a teaspoon. It's mostly dried. The reason, of course, the fresh is more concentrated than the dried is because it hasn't had the opportunity to lose all that moisture. And so the aromatic products in the plant are sort of diluted. I'm just kind of breaking this into pieces. Now, of course, because this has some semi-fresh in it, I can't pack this away in a jar just yet. I would have to make sure that everything inside it is completely dry before I can pack it away. So whatever I don't drink today, it will actually go onto like a little drying screen to finish drying, or even just into a little like muslin bag or something like that would be okay. Something that has airflow to allow it to dry. That's why we use dried instead of fresh. But you can use fresh as long as you use it right away. So This has a definite aroma of the mint from both the spearmint and the peppermint, but it's not overpoweringly minty. Honestly, it just, I don't know how to put it. It smells green. It smells very green and fresh, and it makes a very light, just really delightful spring beverage. Obviously, of course, I've always tested all of my teas before I share the recipes with you. I had some of this tea just earlier today, and it really is just a really good tea for sort of just bringing that springtime energy in and sort of revitalizing your spirit and getting ready to kind of knock out the rest of the year. So there's my little recipe for you. I don't really have anything else right now. We're just going to let the rest of this dry and put it to other uses. I'll be honest, this is kind of the hardest one for me. Ostara is not really a Sabbath that I connect with, which seems ironic, being someone who's a garden person. I think it's because Ostara, like, I'm so hyper focused on all the different things that need to be done. I'm not really thinking about celebrating. But and then of course there's some issues with the crossover between Easter and Ostara. Having been raised as a Catholic, you know, it's a hard Sabbath for me, but this is a nice tea. It was a nice way to kind of bridge that difficulty that I had and, you know, bring my garden into my teacup. So, but that's what I have here for you. I hope you enjoyed this recipe. I hope this video finds you well, and I will see you again soon.